Please welcome our panelists. Admir Masic, Assistant Professor, MIT, and Faculty Founder, MIT React.
Hello.
Elizabeth Roscoe, Executive Director, Western Union Foundation. Robert Hazika, co-founder and executive director of Young African Refugees for Integral Development. And our moderator, Guadalupe Gonzalez, staff reporter at Inc.
They put me very far away. Good morning. Hi. Like you already heard, there's a crisis right now in the world with refugees and immigrants being displaced. And we're here with a wonderful panel to talk about how we can best invest in them and help them succeed. So I would like to ask our wonderful panelists to introduce yourselves and how you ended up here, and just a little bit of what you expect host countries to do to help refugees thrive.
Yes, my name is Admir Masic. I'm really glad to be here. I'm part of this community from the very beginning. Actually, I was a challenge leader of the first challenge, Solve Challenge, that was dealing with how to deliver education in refugee camps. This is a very challenging aspect. And I'm so glad to be here today to contribute again on such an important challenge, another challenge, how to transfer knowledge into jobs, and opportunities.
Thank you. Good morning, Elizabeth Roscoe. I run the Western Union Foundation. We're headquartered out in Colorado. And the mission of the Western Union Foundation is to enable young people, particularly refugees, to connect to the global economy. And we do that through focusing on access to education, to higher education, to workforce training, and all of the psychosocial and support skills that enable people to take those opportunities. I'm really excited to be back at MIT. I was here 2 years ago, and I got connected with MIT Solve because actually we fund one of the solvers, an amazing organization called Kiron, which hopefully I'll get the chance to talk about later. And you asked an important question, which is kind of what is one of the big challenges? You know, what's the one thing that can make a difference? I think the one thing that I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years working in the space at Western Union is the importance of having access. Mm-hmm. Access to formal labor market, to education, to opportunity, to jobs, to access to people who will support and develop individuals to see their worth, to see what opportunity they can create and go and create their own opportunity in the world. And I think for me, that's the one biggest challenge and biggest opportunity is how do we create that access? And that's kind of really what our work is focused on at Western Union.
Good. Robert?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today with you guys. So my name is Robert Hazika. I am originally from Congo, DRC. I've been living in Uganda for the last 11 years as a refugee myself. So in Uganda, I'm the co-founder and the executive director of an organization called Young African Refugees for Integral Development. So it's a refugee-led organization that I and my other 2 colleagues started in Kampala in 2008, just after a few months. What we are more doing is just to support refugees to become self-reliant and to integrate into Uganda society. So for me, I think the most important thing that the host country can give to the refugee, I think it's a more kind of a conducive environment. As I always say, it is our choice to make refugees dependent or independent. And all this depends on what kind of environment we are creating for them. Of course, this is more about the policies in place, the policies in countries. As you know, some countries have this kind of tough policies that do not really allow refugees to feel free. But with my experience, whenever you have an environment where refugees are more free, they can move, they can do whatever they think, they can do whatever any other person can do, it creates more and more like a sense of, people being more comfortable, and it helps a lot. I think that's the most important.
A conducive environment. Just to drill down a little bit and clarify, when you're talking about that, what exactly do you mean? Like, what kind of policies are you finding that affect refugees and don't allow them to have this freedom that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think the policies that affect, like, I'm going to give an example of where I come from in Uganda, where I've been living for the last 10 and plus years. Uganda is known as a country that has one of the best policies in the world, just for two things, because the policy allows refugees to move freely. Mm-hmm. So it means in Uganda, once you get the refugee status, you're free to move wherever you want. And secondly, it gives people the right, the right to work. It means, though we know that Uganda itself, it's still struggling when it comes to unemployment, but at least refugees can decide to do something. They come up with the ideas. If they think that this is what we can do to make our living, they do it without any problem. So I think that is it, yeah.
That's a little bit of what MIT is doing with React, right? Admir, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, React, let me say that it's really all about creating a high-quality educational tools that eventually, for me, and being, at least in my personal case, education was a key to get out of these difficult conditions. By the way, I'm a former refugee. I was born in Croatia. Actually, I was born in a country that doesn't exist, ex-Yugoslavia. And then turned out that I was born in Croatia, but I lived in Bosnia. And during this moment in 90s, it was not great really living in Bosnia in the 90s. A war arrived, and basically what happened is that, by the way, war I call madness always. Remember that. It's a moment of madness, and then things change. But people that are there, unfortunately, they live that, okay? And these are forcibly displaced people that I was part of that people that moved to Croatia. Imagine, I moved in the country where I was born, and I became, what, refugee. With a limited access to education. I was not allowed to go to school. And I was super lucky. It's really a question of luck. It's a matter of being lucky in these conditions of upset, that where you lose everything. You lose home. You have no home. You have nothing. You lose all the belongings. I had these two beautiful, bags and a good certificate, a middle school certificate that allowed me to actually convince a principal of the high school, the first high school I entered, basically, to give me the opportunity. It was the opportunity, the most important opportunity I got in my life eventually, because that day, that person broke the law, Croatian law, that was not allowing refugees to go to school. I said, Admir, you start from Monday.
You were like an auditor of a class, right?
Oh yeah, so he told me that I learned this a posteriori, post-mortem, that he kept me for 2 years, and after laws changed, because eventually things change, he just recognized my 2 years of auditing, like sitting in that class. But also happened that I discovered talent through the same person. This person was a teacher of chemistry. This is what I picked by chance. I had two options, communications and transportation and chemistry. I picked chemistry because I was sure I will go back home and work in the industrial plant for a refinery, of oil. So that was my great plan of my future. And because I knew I will go home. The refugees, every day think about going home. Remember that, it's very important. And so I got into the school, and I became one of the best young chemists of entire Croatia in a year. Because I discovered this talent of solving chemistry problems. There was not much to do in my refugee camp back there. I would play sports and solve chemistry problems. Turned out that I was good Like the same teacher was saying, Admir, you are good. You should come to a competition. And city competition, I somehow won. I have no idea how, but I managed to win. And this was another aha moment. Hey, you are good. Okay, and so all this to tell you that now I'm here at MIT, you know, and everything that happened in my life depended on, it was like one moment where the person broke the law for you, you know? It's really important, and so what React does, we want to really.
It doesn't break the law, though, right?
No breaking laws.
Just
yeah,
clear.
the good thing is that we live in a new world. You know, new world gives us opportunities to go beyond. Education is something that is changing every single day, and this change we need to use to create conditions and opportunities for people to just access to skills, opportunity, and this is what React does. I can tell you more about the details, how we do it. It's basically more or less following some of the ideas that I built through this experience.
And that's a little bit what the Western Foundation also does, right?
Yeah,
It's helping in education.
I'd love to jump in and just talk about Admir's story. So first of all, what an amazing story and an incredibly unique story. Not everyone is as incredibly lucky and talented as you.
Correct.
And the opportunity should be equal for all, right? That's, I think, the point that you're trying to make. One of the things that we've been seeing, and when I started doing this 3 or 4 years ago, specifically for refugees, we were really focused at Western Union Foundation on, okay, education and skills and certification is kind of one of the many answers. Let's really focus on that. And yes, it's right, education and certification is key, but what we learned was, hang on, we need to take a step back. How do you get in the mindset as a youth in a refugee camp who suffered trauma, that, okay, what I'm going to go do is get a degree or higher education and find a sponsor? How do you create the awareness of the importance of education? How do you support the psychosocial part of people's lives, which is, actually, I'm dealing with trauma. I don't feel the self-worth that this is for me, that I can have this opportunity. How incredibly lucky were you and fortunate to find a teacher who believed in you, who saw your talent, who developed that, and how do we create that for everyone? So one of the things that we're trying to work on is, what is the kind of the before you even get to thinking about sponsoring someone's higher education, how do you create that safe environment, right? Safe and stable environment. How do you create the awareness that this is something that is going to be, A, you deserve, that you are empowered to own your own future, and that you have that opportunity. Here is the opportunity, and let us guide you towards that. And then how do you sponsor someone, whether it's financially, whether it's through mentorship, to create the environment for education? How do you create the certification? Actually, this is an education, like you with your middle school certificate, right?
Oh,
how many people come to refugee camp with their certificates in their bag?
Correct.
No one, you've lost everything en route. How do you demonstrate, I have skills, this is what I can do? And we all know the stories, and it's not okay, right? You hear of surgeons flipping burgers, of talented engineers becoming taxi drivers, because when you move to a new community, you don't have the language skills, you don't have the network of contacts, you don't have proof of your education, of your skills, of your abilities. And so a lot of our work is focused not just on these are the life skills, the job skills that will help you, but how to create that environment where someone is empowered, because these are talented, smart, motivated individuals. How do you create that environment for success? And that's really what we're focused on with our work.
And it's precisely what you were saying at the beginning of this, a conducive environment, right? And I want you to share with the audience what you shared with me backstage about how you were able to create this wonderful organization and just how it all started, because you're in a different country, didn't really speak the language, and then you found a very interesting way of bringing everybody together.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I would love to say that, of course, me, from the time that I left my country and went to Uganda, I and my family decided to stay in urban area. As you know, the perception that most of the people have, even up to now, is that, you know, the refugees should be in the camp, refugees should be in the refugee settlements. Actually, in Uganda, we don't call them camp, but we call them settlement, because they are kind of open, like kind of village setting, you know. So, and also when you look at the concept itself, the urban refugees, it's even took long for UNHCR to recognize the presence of urban refugees. I think the very first time was, I think in 1997, when the very first time UNHCR said, yeah, we understand there are refugees in urban area, but still they didn't know what to do about them. And this came up to 2009, when the very first time that UNHCR came up with this policy on urban protection for refugees. And as you know, one of the big challenges that we face and the people are still facing is having these policies. One side, they may be good, but the other side, they are not implemented. So in Uganda, where I found myself, in urban area, of course, people need to understand, and that is actually one of the questions that people always ask. Why are you in Kampala? Why did you choose to go to Kampala? Why did you go to the refugee settlements? And sometimes people think that as you're in the refugee in Kampala or in urban setting, that means you are well, you are okay. Yet it's not always the case. All this depends on your background. Like myself, I was born in the city, and once, when I came to Uganda, when I learned that there was that opportunity to stay in the urban area, I couldn't think twice. And there are also other refugees who, once they cross the border, they directly go to the refugee settlements because they know that is where they fit, and especially those with rural backgrounds. But there are also this permanent movement, people from the settlement, and especially in a country as like Uganda, where people are afraid to move. Sometimes people go to the refugee settlement, and then after they find it very difficult, they go to the city. And also in the city, people find life difficult. They cannot afford to pay rent and so on. They go to the refugee settlement. So this is the kind of environment I found myself. I remember we had in 2008, the number of urban refugees was around 37,000, different nationalities, and the majority of them were from my country. I come from in Congo. And these refugees were receiving very, very limited support from UNHCR and other service providers. And the majority of them were young people. These young people who do not have go to school, they are idle, they don't have jobs. And as you know, young people, they find themselves in the situation where they cannot go to school or get a job, they start getting involved in these negative activities. That is what I was more worried about as a refugee myself, but also as someone who had a chance to go to school and looking at this is really a very serious problem. And then that's when we came up with the idea, I and my other two colleagues. The idea initially was not to create an organization. We did not even have that one in our mind. So the idea was just to try to create a space where we can bring people and kind of start discussing about different issues affecting our life. Then we came up with the idea of starting a football training. It was just a matter of getting 1 or 2 balls. And when we decided to start, and in just 1 week, we managed to bring together 400 and plus young people from different nationalities. And then actually we're more even scared. You say, what are we going to do with all this number of people? And you see these people had so many expectations. They thought, now we are here, what's next? So what do? We can play. That is now when we started trying to develop some ideas and identify the challenges and try to come up with a solution. And the first one was to start a language training, as my colleague said before, because that was identified as the major challenge. And you can understand this is the kind of the same approach that we've been using from the beginning up to now. Bring people together, let's identify the issues together, and let's come up with a solution together. And up to now, this is what we're still doing. Yeah.
Do you mind if I jump in? Because I think this is incredibly important, right? This is about refugees standing together, supporting each other. And what's missing in the current political environment, and I'm not a political person, but we're seeing protectionism, we're seeing nationalism. What we're not seeing is other people standing up and supporting refugees. I think one of the things that we think is really important, and something that even the CEO of Western Union is focused on, is how do we start to change the narrative on how refugees are seen, on how they have a benefit to the host communities that they are moving into, both economically, culturally, socially, and not that they are seen as a threat, that they're seen as someone less or separate. And I think that the important point you're raising is that refugees have this incredible desire to succeed like we all do. How do we get together? What's next? I want to learn more. I want to do more. And society is holding them back. They're saying that you're not welcome here, that you're not acceptable. One of the things we're trying to do by just using our voice, Western Union's a Fortune 500 company. The CEO has lived in many countries. How do we start using our voice to talk about refugees being a benefit to the host communities, about having opportunities to go back home eventually, and about supporting them, just changing that narrative from a negative to a positive one. And that's something that all of us can do at a very, very, very simple level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's one of the misconceptions about refugees, is that they're fleeing because they want to. They're not,
They are
right?
forcibly displaced. They jump on these boats with the knowledge that every day 6 people die in that. Every day, this is statistics from UNHCR. Every day in the Mediterranean Sea, 6 people die. And now you are supposed to give all your belongings, all your money to these criminals that manage the crossing of the Mediterranean with your family to move. It's not that I said that they want to go home and they are supposed to jump on that boat. It's really important to remember that there is this huge misconception and that these people are humans like we are.
Yeah.
And that they want to live, they want to love, they want to thrive, they want to make difference in this world, and unfortunately right now opportunities are really what that are missing, and once we are able to leverage on hopefully technology to impact education, jobs, and everything that is related to a normal life. Then we will move forward. And I believe that education somehow, I'm stressing this aspect of education simply because I think it's also a means for a peace. It puts us beyond our differences and help us to
it's something that you can
build
do
a better world. Yeah.
from your trenches, right? It's something that you can do no matter if you're rich or not. It's just inclusion and helping them feel safe. What else are the things, the people that are watching us, the people that are here, what can they do to help refugees thrive and succeed?
Okay, well, I think this is, I don't want to repeat what I said before, but I think this is really very, very important. One of the things that I think people need to do, of course, refugees need to be considered as any other person. We have seen so many potential refugees. When you look at what refugees are doing, and there are so many researches that have been done, for instance, in Kampala, and to see that tremendous contribution of refugees in the economy just because they are given that opportunity. There are businesses, when you go, for instance, in Kampala, there is a building of hundreds of shops that we call gatherlands, where they sell more this jewelry. They are mainly owned by the Ugandan, but who are the distributors? Who are the customers? Who are the people who can travel from the city up to very far, even across the border? They are refugees. We've talked to so many people in that building when we're doing our researches and say, oh, we rely on refugees. If they are not there, this building will not be, all of us will not be here. I think, again, that's a conducive environment. Look at refugees that are as an asset, but not as a burden. I think that is really very important. And this, unfortunately, that's something that is done, like in so many Western countries. When you go in Europe, people don't normally look at refugees as an asset. They look at them as a burden. These are people who are coming, they're going to affect our economy, they're going to, all these kind of perception and so on. I think for me that is really the very big, important point, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Elizabeth?
For me, and very briefly, because I know we're running out of time, probably two things. First, and we talked about it, is narrative. How do we talk positively about refugees, whether that's on social media, whether that's just using our voice to stand with refugees? And secondly, action. And action can be from small to large. You know, we're a corporation. We're thinking about hiring practices. We've hired refugees. We're thinking about inclusion. Quick example, we took a group of about 30 Western Union young leaders. You know, you had to be under 30 to go to One Young World in The Hague last year. We brought 2 refugees from Kiryondongo settlement in Uganda, from one of the programs we support, to be they were not, and we brought a refugee, this is the Western Union delegation. It includes Western Union employees and empowering youth leaders from their own communities. And we just made that one single group, and they're still connecting, you know, 1 year, 2 years later. And action can be as small as sponsoring, supporting someone's education, to very large, you know, setting up an NGO to support, or writing an online course for someone like Kieran, the MIT solver that we support, who are doing online education for refugees, a bit like MIT React. So very, very small actions make a very, very big difference, and the point is just to take some action, even if it is a tiny step forward.
I think that's a great way to end this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you all, and I hope you enjoy this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.